Hi, welcome back to the Dialed In Angling podcast. This week we are in search of perch, shooting a perch episode using underwater cameras to find perch and ultimately to catch perch. It's one of my favorite things to do with camera use. We're going to get into underwater camera use in general, underwater camera use as a tool. And then, of course, this week, my guest is none other than Joel Nelson of OnXFish. Joel and I have been good friends for a long time. We've fished together. Joel's an overall fish head, just like all of us out there. So happy to have him on the program. Joel, welcome to the Dialed In Angling podcast, my friend.
First-time listener, other way around. First-time caller, long-time listener. Yeah, I can't wait. This is going to be fun. I love fishing perch. And underwater cameras, that's near and dear to my heart too.
Yeah, if I think back, like the first time I used an underwater camera was, I know I'm dating myself, but it was in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when cameras had first kind of hit the scene, and I was hooked. I mean, I had a hard time going out ice fishing without my underwater camera. Matter of fact, I would avoid bodies of water that were stained or dark because I couldn't fish with a camera. One of my favorite locations was actually fishing in a weed bed for bluegills because bass were coming through, bluegills were coming through. And it wasn't even that great of fishing there, but because I could use my underwater camera, I fell in love.
I remember when it was so effective as a tool, people were worried about they were trying to make them illegal, right? Trying to outlaw them because anglers were seeing what we had never seen before in a way we'd never seen it. I mean, the learning factor alone was what drew me in. I didn't even care if I was catching that much, as long as I could be seeing the fish and learning more about what they're doing, where they're at, why they're there. All of those things were just fascinating to me.
I tell lots of people I'm a better angler, not just an ice angler, but I'm a better angler because of underwater cameras. I got to see how these fish react to baits, things they liked, things they didn't like. I spent thousands of hours looking at an underwater camera, and I still do today. And this episode that we shot with Dialed In Angling, I use an underwater camera to find perch, but then catch perch. I don't want to tease out the whole episode, and I don't want to be a spoiler here and wreck the whole episode, but I think if you think of a species, there's a couple species that come to mind when it comes to underwater camera use, and perch would be at the top of that list. Perch fishing, you can drop a camera down, and there's lots of times where perch will just come into the camera. So for a scouting tool, there's nothing better.
Yeah, they're relatively unafraid. And I think back to a bite I was on a number of years ago. We were filming an In-Depth Outdoors episode, and we were on the Golden Highway on Devil's Lake, and we saw perch galore. And without a camera, you weren't going to catch one. It was just that simple. We did some interesting rigging things. We'll maybe get into that, but I was a believer in underwater cameras at that point, but I was absolutely sold from that point forward using them for perch.
Okay, I'm going to touch on that point because I can think of 2 or 3 scenarios that come to mind where if I didn't have an underwater camera, I wouldn't have caught a third of the perch that I caught because of the underwater camera. One is because of light biters. I was on a couple different perch bites, one in the Dakotas, one in Minnesota. I can think of where the bite was so finesse where you needed that camera even to detect the strike. But then another perch scenario where, and it happens all the time, where you have thousands of perch down there.
Yeah.
If you look on 2D sonar, it just looks like a huge blob because there's literally thousands of perch down there, but you're trying to pick out the big ones in the school. And a lot of times those great big jumbos, they'll either hover underneath the school or they're grazing the bottom or they come through quickly. And so having that underwater camera, you can keep it away from the small ones, and then you can personally pick out the bigger fish.
We had a great time on that bite that I was referencing in catching fish off of the bottom. We had actually set baits on the bottom, and the fish would go in and eat it clean off the bottom. If you raise the bait off even a little bit, or even try to keep a tight line for bite detection, they wanted nothing to do with it. They really wanted a free-swimming minnow that was basically anchored on the bottom, and without a camera, you wouldn't have even felt the bite. You just would have had no clue, no hope on that day.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. I mean, perch are bottom feeders. They're feeding on invertebrates. I can think of most scenarios where these perch are seeking out mayfly larvae, bloodworms, you name it, that is coming out of that mud, even small like crustaceans, like small little tiny crayfish or snail. I've had it where I've cleaned them and they have little snails in their stomach. They're always feeding on the bottom. And so that beating the silt, I think that actual technique came from underwater camera use. I don't think that happened until we had underwater cameras.
I agree completely. I remember some of my better days of Mille Lacs, and obviously don't fish it anywhere near like you do or as much, but man, you've got mayfly larvae lining the hole. Those things are spitting them up left and right. And to your point about not being able to see it, if you didn't know that, you might not even be fishing near bottom. And depending on their activity or mood, perch, when they're on fire, they'll murder a bait. But when they're not, they can really be off. Without those cues, you're somewhat lost. I got to believe that underwater cameras have contributed to perch fishing as much or more than sonar has, as anglers have gotten more comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I always say perch are the fish that I love to hate because they can be anywhere and they can be nowhere. You can find them out in a basin, you can find them up on a shallow water flat,
right?
All within one day. And they're always pulling this Houdini trick where they're there and then they're gone. As a guide where I'm out chasing perch all the time, especially when I get into those time frames. Typically later in the winter is when I'm really, really chasing big numbers of perch. But, you start on a shallow water flat in one instance, and then, by the end of the day, you're out in 25 to 30 feet of water. So those fish can kind of be anywhere in the water column. They're always on the move because they're a prey species, but they're always feeding. And I think the biggest reason for them moving as much as they do is forage.
Right. Yeah. It seems like the best bites I've ever been on for perch are sporadic, they're erratic, they're fast and furious, but they're never stationary. You're always moving, jamming and jiving. And actually that bite that I was talking about is somewhat of a rare instance where it was a cold front. They were kind of just locked in there. And man, typically those cold front days for perch, I don't do too well without a little bit extra help.
Yeah, I think, I'd way rather tell people, give people pointers on where they can find walleyes than jumbo perch, because it's hard because they're moving so much. I could tell you that, we caught our limit one day on this particular weed flat. You go out there 2 days later and they're nowhere to be seen. So you think I'm lying to you or whatever, but that's just how perch fishing is. But using a camera, like an underwater camera, to find these fish is really important. It's an important tool in what I do. I carry a little handheld camera with me. Cameras have really evolved, I would say, over the last 20 years, but especially in the last 10, wouldn't you say?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, the addition of not just the high definition on the screen that you're looking, but high definition outputs, having 1080p to a big screen in a fish house, on-screen direction and display, all these things that make it easier both to fish with the unit, find your lure with the unit, see things in a higher, higher frequency, higher density, HD, like we've never done before. That's the kind of thing that, man, it just makes it more enjoyable, right?
Yeah, it makes it enjoyable, fun. The size of the units, they've, I can think of 3 different underwater cameras that I have right now. One I like using in a wheelhouse would be one I can use with like an HDMI output, something like a Quest, like a Markham Quest, where you can actually plug it into a big screen TV and then watch it on the big screen. That's just, I call it adult daycare, because even for me, like if I'm in a wheelhouse and you plug in an underwater camera and there's perch coming through, you're going to have a hard time getting me out of that house and moving around and hole hopping.
Right.
Another camera that I almost always have in my grasp would be like a Recon or a Pursuit, something that's portable and handheld. It's super light. I can put it in my backpack. I can put it in the back of my ATV or snowmobile. I always have that on hand because I use it a lot for scouting. Okay. Like I was saying earlier in the podcast, a lot of times when you drop a camera down there, even if you don't hit the silt or hit the bottom, perch are curious by nature, so they'll kind of come over and take a look at the camera.
Yeah.
You think about that. I use underwater cameras in the summer, and smallmouth bass kind of do the same thing, where they come in and they look at the camera. They're super curious. Perch are very similar in that instance where they'll come in. And so if you're on these shallow water weed flats, it's really hard to just drop your 2D sonar down, drop your jig down, and decipher what's down there. It's much quicker and much more efficient to drop that recon or pursuit down and just scan around. And like you were saying, these cameras have gotten so high def that you can really see a lot further than you ever used to be.
Right. Yeah. The clarity doesn't need to be what it used to be. There's such good contrast options. I take that Markham camera, for example. If I'm at a sports show and I'm just kind of showing it off, I always take that light and I shine it up at the sky, up at the roof, up at the lights, and you'll see it can adjust to the settings and you can see everything on the screen. Then you poke it under the table and that auto-adjusting iris contracts and you can see in dark water too. And so being able to kind of fish in a variety of waters, still see what you're trying to look at. You don't have that snowstorm effect when you turn the lights on back like you used to do with the old ones. So it's just easier than ever before. And I'd say more fruitful because of it.
Yeah, I agree. Cameras, I think, will always have their place. Even if you have a forward-facing sonar type of unit, you still need cameras. There is so many times that I can think of where you're trying to find the forest from the trees when it comes to big or small perch.
Yeah.
Or if I'm in cabbage, for example, I see fish, okay, and I can see them on forward-facing sonar. I can see them on 2D sonar.
Yeah.
But I want to see them in person.
For sure. And think about this. I know you and I have talked about this before, but when new baits come out or I just want to get familiar with a bait, I think there's nothing better to do than to drop your sonar and to drop a camera next to it and see what a small jig stroke does to that bait. Does it pop high? Does it erratically shoot to the side? And then you can start tuning in your jigging strokes because most people overwork baits. Underwater cameras taught me to stop over jigging as much. And again, another wrinkle that I never would have learned without it, right?
Definitely. I am a better fisherman because of an underwater camera. And I learned so much. I mean, I've learned, like you said, a ton about jigging, my cadence, how that bait reacts, how my spoon reacts, my rattle bait, there's so many benefits to using that underwater camera. And again, it's fun to use. So let's step away from camera use and a little bit into perch fishing because perch fishing across the board, I think, at Dialed In Angling, we tackle a lot of different species throughout the course of the season, whether it's walleyes, panfish, perch, trout, you name it. And perch are always one of my favorite species to go after, not just on film or guiding, but just personally, because I spend so much time chasing walleyes, throughout the year that when I get opportunities to fish perch, I really just embrace those opportunities because it's one of those species that can be really aggressive, really fun, especially jumbo, like huge jumbo perch, because they're really rare across the ice belt. They're I don't want to say they're as rare as like a giant bluegill, but finding big jumbo perch are a lot rarer than people think.
Let's dig into that because I've always wondered how you do it. I know you fish a lot of different bodies of water, so you have knowledge of where perch are in different places. But I think the number one complaint for most anglers that I always hear about with perch is, they'll get on Mille Lacs or they'll go down by me in southern Minnesota and there's bait perch everywhere. But that's nowhere near the perch they want to catch. So when you're seeing bait perch, what do you do? I mean, obviously you're moving or you're doing something different to get off of that size class of fish and find ones, like you said, the jumbos that are rare, that are hard to catch. What's your approach? I mean, if you could boil it down.
I think a lot of the smaller perch, my father-in-law used to call them residents, the resident perch that just kind of hang in the weeds, hang in the rocks. That's not really what you're looking for. I mean, if you're finding small perch, doesn't necessarily mean that there's big perch around. There's certain times a year where, yes, they are actually feeding on those small young of the year perch or resident perch. But most of the time, if you're finding big numbers of the small perch, that means there's not bigger perch around. There's no predators around.
Sure.
Or there's a lack of predators.
Yeah, they're comfortable there, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they find bait, they're like, oh, I found bait. In the winter, if I find bait, I think there's no fish around. And I've experienced that a lot where there's no walleyes around, there's no big perch. First and foremost, you have to have a body of water that's conducive to growing jumbo perch.
Right.
I think that's where OnXFish ties in, checking some of the species.
Yeah, for sure.
The data that you have on that particular app, and we'll get into the OnXFish app in a bit. But you have to find bodies of water that can grow big perch.
Yeah.
And that's why the Dakotas can grow big perch, North Dakota in particular. There's a lot of lakes, potholes, systems that have a lot of forage in which can grow big perch. I think of Devil's Lake, for example.
Yeah.
The shrimp, right?
Shrimp-dominated systems, right?
Yep. The shrimp obviously grows those fish rapidly. I think of lakes in Minnesota like Mille Lacs, Winnie, Leech, Cass, where you have just a ton of bug hatches that happen throughout the year. So that in turn will grow these perch to larger sizes and much quicker. I think perch in those systems grow much faster than other lakes, because I have been to smaller lakes where all of a sudden you have a really good year class of what I would consider a jumbo.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but for me, it seems like when those fish get into that 10, 12 inch range, that's kind of the range of what I consider jumbo.
Yeah. Yep.
Anything over that are megas, right?
Yeah, right.
And certainly we have lakes all around that we fish, within the Midwest that have what I would consider mega perch, and those are over the 12 inches. They're still jumbos.
Oh, right.
Classified as jumbos, but certainly that 10 to 12 inch range is pretty common. And I think lakes like Mille Lacs, Mille Lacs in particular, I mean, you can have a perch hatch and 3 to 4 years later, you're dumping, those big females are already starting to approach that 10 to 12 inch range, which is remarkable because other systems, it takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years to grow a quote unquote jumbo perch.
I'm used to fishing a lot down in the Mississippi River backwaters where there's a lot of big perch too. And those fish are feeding on a variety of forage. Those river systems are just choked with food, rich with all different kinds of both invertebrates and minnow species that they're chasing. And I agree with you, a jumbo, even down there, 11 inches and bigger, definitely a jumbo. But you get into that 12 inch plus, it's just a different fish, right? It looks different. They got a big old knob on their head, almost like a big bluegill. Like the river perch, they are thick, and it's a lot of fun to fish those things too.
Yeah, I like the perch that get over 13. Once you get 13, 14, I think, I've never met an angler that's ever lied about the size of the fish they catch.
Never.
But I think a lot of perch anglers will say, oh, yeah, we're catching 12s and 13s when they're actually catching 10s and 11s.
Oh, 100%. You put those fish to a measuring board. Yeah, you're right. They're never as big as they claim to be.
Well, it's like once you hit over 12 inches, they do get freakish. I mean, they get big. You look at Mille Lacs, Devil's Lake, a lot of potholes in North Dakota where once they get over 12, that huge pot belly they have on them, we call them toads. I mean, they just turn into like a toad belly. They have just like almost like a frog belly on them because they get so massive.
On Gogebic, they call them teeter pigs, right? They can set them up and down, and they won't tip over. They're just kind of teeter there because they're so fat. They can rest on their belly. Yeah,
and I fished them out there in Michigan, actually.
Yeah.
Went out there a couple years ago, fished them, and caught some really impressive fish. For me in particular, I think I hang my hat on finding big perch and finding perch and numbers of perch. And I like doing it all across the Midwest. I think finding big perch like that, not only individuals, like for example, bluegill fishing, like to find a big bull bluegill, if you catch one or two or a handful, you're happy.
Yeah.
Whereas if you catch just a couple perch, that's not what I want to do. I want to whale on perch.
Right.
I want to catch a whole bunch of them. Even if I'm harvesting them or not, I don't really care. I just want to catch them. I want to get into schools of perch that when you drop the spoon down, it doesn't matter if you have bait on there or not.
Yeah.
They are attacking.
And they're meeting you halfway between the bottom of the ice and the lake bottom. That's just a blast. Now, I had a question for you too about perch when we're starting to talk about, you're using forward-facing sonar more and more these days. We all are. Is it harder to try and decipher those schools of perch because there tend to be so many of them, right? Is it almost like information overload where you've got the bait perch, the jumbos, maybe some walleyes and things mixed in? Or can you really effectively target them? Are they off bottom? Are they together? I mean, tell me what you're looking for with forward-facing and perch.
That's a little bit challenging, and that's where underwater cameras come in, because a lot of times the perch are so tight to the bottom in these areas. Let's say there's rubble on the bottom or sandgrass, and so they're hanging in these sometimes little depressions within those areas, and it's tougher to see them. You really have to look. I mean, noise can be a real factor, especially if you're in like a shallow water flat, for example, where the perch are moving around, and so. Yeah, you can definitely decipher them. They look different than the walleyes. I mean, certainly there's times where I've scanned out and I can see them just everywhere in there.
Carpeting,
It's usually when they're up off the bottom feeding. And you can tell, the difference as far as they sort of look like a little globe or a ball, so you've got little ones and you've got big ones. But sometimes when those big schools are so bunched up, it's challenging to tell the forest from the trees.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's why I like using an underwater camera where I can. I use it all the time. There's never a scenario of perch fishing where I don't have that camera at least with me. Whether it's in my machine or in my truck, I keep that pursuit or a recon with me all the time.
I remember a bite on Winnie we were on. At least I think it was Winnie. It might have been a lake nearby, but it was later ice, and we were catching fish left and right. And you had that camera down, and I looked at it. It was scary. It was like they were. There was a mass of like silt coming off the bottom. They were coming at the camera lens. You would jig the jigging spoon. It was getting attacked. It was wild, and that kind of fun, that mayhem, that's perch fishing to me, right? That total crazy peak bite when that's going down. If you've never experienced it, get out and fish more for perch, because it's one of the more enjoyable ways to get after them.
I like recording that footage.
Well, yeah,
like when you show someone that footage of, literally hundreds of perch just attacking the spoon and going crazy down there.
Yeah.
If you watch that footage and you don't have a positive reaction, that means you don't like fishing at all. Right.
Yep.
Even if you're not an angler, you still think, wow, that's impressive, especially when you get those really big perch, because the really big perch, even on camera, look freakish. They got the giant belly. You can tell them apart from the other perch. They're finned up. They're mad. They're aggressive. They're almost like a pack of tigers down there, and they're just shredding baits as they come by. And I can't say enough good things about camera fishing in general, but camera fishing and perch, they just go hand in hand. There's no doubt about it. So let's get into what you do for a living, and that's OnXFish.
Yeah, you bet, man. Well, I took a job here this spring. I'd worked at the University of Minnesota for a long time, and I always told people that I worked a little bit in the fishing industry and a little bit of my main job, and I had a foot on two different icebergs, and sometimes those icebergs would float close together, and other times I was doing the splits. But now, full on board OnXFish, I can tie in that mapping segment of what I always loved to the fishing part, which I grew up loving. I mean, that's been a lifelong passion. So OnXFish has been a wild ride, and we're just getting going. We're now free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, going to be expanding to new states soon. Free for a limited time, at least for the foreseeable future. We're trying to get people into the app to check it out, get some feedback, and hear from folks like Tony what they think of it, how we can make it better. What does it change for you out fishing, and how can we continue to be a part of that process? So it's been a wild ride so far.
I know for me, I'm a map geek.
Yeah.
I truly am. Like if I'm going to a destination, I'm always exploring the maps. I'm always seeking out new lakes on the maps. I can think back of, I use it all the time. My OnX hunt map. I find lakes out in the middle of nowhere where I might be looking for a hunting location. I'm like, I'm curious about that lake. Now I can click on the OnXFish map and get data on that lake instantly. What's cool, there's so many cool built-in features to the
Yeah.
map. When you click on that lake, the amount of data that you have at literally the touch of your fingertips is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. We like to think of it as a 3-part process using the app. Anglers are going to use it to plan their fishing, right? You're doing what we do. We just nerd out about maps and we're cruising around the map and we click on it. We see the fisheries information. We see maybe an area is an outlier for perch. And we're like, okay, great. So that's the first step, planning. The second step is then getting to the lake. There's access information all over there and you can go ahead and find your way to that lake. And then the third part is definitely once you're on the lake, utilizing the in-app weather, contours, trying to do tracking. You can track your way onto the ice and then safely back off. And there's even Apple CarPlay enacted now. So when we'll be driving trucks out on the lakes, that'll be a great way to find our waypoints and get from A to B.
The driving directions is worth its weight in gold.
Tell us about that. Tell me a little bit about that.
I spend countless hours chasing bites in all sorts of different lakes all over the Midwest, really, and not just for dialed in angling, but also for guiding. And so I find myself in these backwoods lakes all the time. And when you just pull up your Google Maps or your map features in your vehicle, they don't give you public access or any access point, right? And so with OnXFish, you can not only see where it's at, but you get driving directions.
Right.
And that's extremely helpful for me because I can't tell you how many times I've been driving down logging roads, pulling a trailer, stuck on that logging road because I couldn't back up.
Right.
There's nowhere to turn around because I didn't have sufficient directions to get to that lake.
Yeah, it's as simple as literally, like you said, clicking on the access, clicking driving directions, and it'll take you on your car's in-screen, in-dash system either to Apple Maps or Google Maps, and it'll take you home. It'll take you to the next lake. And, man, like we said, traveling in lakes country, there's no such thing as straight lines. So you can burn up hour and a half just messing around trying to get from A to B. So being efficient like you have to be as a guide, like I could see where that's just not just a time saver, but almost crucial, right?
It's already helped me. I can't tell you, when you click on it, it tells you ETA, when you're going to be there.
Right.
It is a true game changer. I mean, just that feature alone. And then on top of it, doing research. I spend, again, countless hours looking at maps. Now with OnXFish, I've been scrolling a lot of lakes in which I've wanted to try for a while.
Yeah.
This year so far, especially in northern Minnesota, the Dakotas, we don't have a ton of snow yet.
Right.
So this is the time that I want to access these lakes before we get dumped on with snow,
right,
before I can't get to these locations. And so I've been spending a ton of time just sitting in bed and looking at different lakes and different lake data.
Right. Yeah, the lake data is impressive because if you're used to using the DNR Lake Finder in Minnesota, you can find surveys, and that's just the start of it, though, because let's say we're in an area near Mille Lacs and we want to find a good bluegill lake, or maybe bluegills and crappies that we're interested in keeping a few fish. So you click on this keeper potential tab, and up comes a nearby group of lakes on the call card, and also little red dots on the map for you to try for lakes that there's DNR fisheries information for fish in a keepable kind of eater range that make up more than 35% of that lake's population. So it's really going to change how people are finding a way to the species of interest that they want to go catch and the size ranges that they want to catch. Because if you want to catch just trophies, you can do that with the app too.
Yeah, right on. This week between Christmas and New Year's, the holiday break, the kids are on, school holiday break.
Yeah.
This is a great time to get out and explore lakes. Oh. This is when I do a lot of exploration.
Yep.
I drag my son and his buddies. I know your kids love to fish.
Mm-hmm.
They have buddies that like to fish. Right now, if you're going to do lake exploration, it's time to do it. This year, when we've got really good ice forming, again, doing it safely, where you're checking ice conditions on each and every different body of water. But there's so many different lakes that come to mind for me that I want to check out right now. Like I am geeked up over several lakes, and some of them I haven't been able to access for a few years because of snow.
Yes.
We had a couple years with heavy snow, and then last year with it being so warm, I wasn't about to just go, I had enough trouble last year just getting us on safe ice for dialed in angling. I didn't have time to go explore lakes that I was unfamiliar with. Right. This year is the year I'm going to do it. And my son and I have been looking at the app. We've been on OnXFish a lot.
Yeah.
And he's been texting me a few lakes that he's interested in. I've showed him a few that I'm interested in. Right. A couple of his buddies have been geeking out over it.
Yeah.
It's cool,
great.
Man.
It is cool. We were just the other day driving in the truck with my boys, and they're on the app, and they're looking at lakes nearby, like as we're driving past, like, ooh, that one is an outlier for bass. I want to get back there this summer and just throw wacky rings at the shoreline all day. So, yeah, I think a couple points about the app, too, to mention. We are currently available on the App Store for Apple iOS. If you're an Android user, we're sorry for now. That's something we're working on. But you can access the web version either on mobile, a tablet, your desktop, whatever, at onxmaps.com/fish. Again, it's a free app right now, so really nothing to lose. And we're going to keep making things better, like the contours. We're going to make those better. We're going to do all kinds of different things. This isn't Navionics. This isn't One Boat Network. This is more of a whole solution app that'll solve your weather needs, your planning needs, save waypoints. It's a fishing journal that you can store photos to. This thing really does a lot of different things, and our goal is to get people excited to be an adventurer. And guys like yourself that go out and are wanting to try all these new lakes, man, you're our guy. You're our target audience, the adventurer.
I can't tell you how many lakes are like sort of on these logging roads or off the beaten paths where I can now get directions to them. It's pretty cool, man.
And think about from Wisconsin anglers' perspective. I mean, you fished over there. I've fished over there. It was like the dark ages for many years. Like there was just no information on anything. And now for the first time, those people are starting to see the data that's been kept in file drawers and computer hard drives for years. And now it's seeing the light of day, and it's really going to educate a lot of folks over there, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have any fishing plans this holiday break here with the kids?
Yeah, absolutely. We stay fluid, always trying to make sure that, like, hey, if we can even just get out for an afternoon, we're going to do it. But we've got a trip planned up north, somewhere near the Whitefish chain, and we're going to fish all over central Minnesota there. My youngest son, Micah, wants to catch a bunch of walleyes. We might spend some time on Mille Lacs. My other son, Isaac, he likes the weird fish or just about anything else. So, like, he was pointing out some pike lakes. He just wants to set tip-ups and watch flags. Yeah. Like, the joy of being a kid, like, that stuff is just seeing a flag. Who doesn't like that? It's like watching a bobber go down. It's great.
You know, when I'm pan fishing or perch fishing, I kind of get laser focused on that species.
Yeah.
But when I go out with my son, he almost always brings tip-ups. He's always like, hey, we got to stop and get some sucker minnows for pike. And, like, normally I wouldn't care. Like, if I'm chasing bluegills, I don't care about putting tip-ups out for pike.
Yep.
But when we do that, we have such a fun fishing experience and kind of a well-rounded fishing experience.
For sure.
Certainly when I'm walleye fishing, we're dead sticking and we're jigging. But pike, like, I don't know. I tend to overlook it. And I'm not saying if I'm targeting pike, then yes, I'm all in. But if I'm targeting another species, I tend to forget the tip-ups and forget that stuff. But when I'm out with the kids, they love flags. So we always bring the tip-ups. I always pick up sucker minnows. And there's times where you can't keep the flags in the water. And it's fun. All the kids are running in different directions.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you caught a pile of fish. You caught bluegills. You caught pike. It was a great, well-rounded fishing experience.
It's a little more active when things are otherwise slow or you got to focus or really, really pay attention to detail. This is not that. This is different, right? Watching flags, I mean, I remember we always just grab a football, whatever, throw football around on the ice, hang out, cook, eat, have a great time. And then a flag goes off to break up the action. And sometimes it's not just the fishing that makes people want to go fishing.
When I was in the Dakotas, we had this discussion about hanging hot dogs underneath tip-ups, right? And people laughed. And I told Bill Shirk about this on our first podcast episode. I went out to the Dakotas with this group of anglers, and they didn't buy minnows.
Really?
They literally had hot dogs, and I brought some minnows, and I was putting minnows on the tip-up, and they looked at me like I was alien.
What?
because they couldn't believe that I had spent money on minnows for pike. They were just baffled, like I was wasting my money.
That's hilarious.
When you can catch them on hot dogs. And I'm looking at them thinking, I've never seen a hot dog on a tip up.
No, nor have I.
And so both of us, it was a learning experience because I could not believe the amount of pike that they had caught on a hot dog, first of all. And then second of all, they couldn't believe the amount of pike that I caught on a minnow. Like it was sort of funny. It was a kind of a group of farmers, and that's the way they had grown up fishing. And they had fished these little pothole lakes, and there wasn't minnows. If you think about the Dakotas, there's not sucker minnows out there, right?
No, and bait shops are few and far between too, right?
Correct.
You're ways away.
Correct. So, hanging these hot dogs on tip-ups. Now, when I take my kids out, we isolate one tip-up with a quick strike rig with a fun dog on it. I mean, if you want to get a laugh out of kids or get them, just remembering the experience.
Right.
Throw some fun dogs. And you know what? If the fish aren't biting, you can always throw them on the grill.
That's right. Then you got a backup food plan.
That's right. That's another thing that I enjoy doing as I get older. I am always like, go, 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 right?
Yeah.
Drilling holes, moving around. I want to be on the fish. When I grew up with my dad, for example, he would say he wouldn't bring food or anything. He'd be like, we're not on a picnic. That's what he'd say. Like, I'd be like, hey, Dad, you got a sandwich? Did you bring any something to drink? He'd be like, no, we're fishing. We're not on a picnic. So I kind of grew up with that mentality. But now when I have the whole crew out there for the holidays, I love firing up the grill. Nothing better than hot food on the ice, whether you're cooking brats, hot dogs, burgers. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I've even been up in Canada where we grilled moose steaks. I mean, that was probably the best grilling experience I can think of. But grilling anything out there, hot food, watching flags go off, catching fish. I can't think of a better way to spend a day on the ice. And now when we get a day where it's windy and I can't grill or something, it's like you miss out on that experience.
I think that's why so many people like the wheelhouse experience, is whether they're just in the wheelhouse or whether they're kind of spread out just outside of it. There is the grilling, there is the food, the comfort, some of the fun and adventure that comes not just from the fishing part, but all these other parts. And I liken it back to open water fishing with my boys. We used to take them out in the boat, and it was like a prison to them. But you give them a rod and a chance to go fish off the dock and mess with frogs and catch turtles and all that stuff. It's the same thing with ice fishing. I think they need just a little bit more than just the fishing. And as they grow into more serious anglers, like my boys and your son and daughter already are, it's a fun transformation to watch them get even more dialed into what they like to do.
It's cool because my daughter's in college now. She has a boyfriend. Well, he's really into fishing.
Oh, nice.
And so it kind of, she grew up fishing with me, open water, ice fishing. And so now she's kind of like reinterested in it because of her boyfriend. And it's cool to see, as a dad, to see kind of full circle moments, to see your kids kind of not only doing it with you, but doing it on their own. Like, she wants to go out with her boyfriend. My son likes to go with his buddies. He's got his own gear. And to kind of see that where he's doing it on his own, as a dad, that makes me super proud. And like, I will go out of my way to facilitate that. Yeah. Like, I will make sure everything's charged,
Yep.
And they do it on their own. They're kind of getting into, kind of like winter camping almost. They're getting into more next level type of fishing. It's not just going out ice fishing with their buddies. Now they're doing some ice camping, and they're going on trips. They're driving places where it's like destinations to catch jumbo perch or to catch walleyes. So it's really cool to see. I instill safety in my son, every time he goes out. I preach ice safety and just safety in general. You got 4 kids in a truck, for example. I worry about them driving to a particular location. As a dad, you never stop worrying. But if you teach them everything right and the right way to do it, they do it on their own. They're smart.
Yeah, bring them out there with you, as we have since our kids were young. They get to see some circumstances that are a little less than desirable, right? They might have to change a tire or figure out that, hey, it isn't always perfect as we drive. We might encounter some ice or some snow. We have to drive slower. There's a lot of things that they can run into, and giving those experiences is just invaluable. I feel like it's my duty as a dad. If I'm not doing that, I'm doing something wrong.
Well, and young people can get into ice fishing really easy. I'm talking, high schoolers and even younger, because ice fishing is still a really affordable sport, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, I can think back of my earliest memories of ice fishing. I literally had a lawn chair, a fishing rod, and an ice auger, a hand auger.
Yeah.
To this day, you can still do that and still have a good time. Or go out, even a hand auger and a couple tip-ups.
Yeah, and if you want to upgrade, it's still not that expensive in comparison to get a small pop-up, maybe a little heater. You can make small upgrades along the way, too. You don't need to shoot right to the top. As a high school kid, I know I certainly didn't. I just fished with what I could afford, and man, it was about the fishing, not the gear.
The gear is way better now, though.
It's amazing.
Way better. These kids have...
They're lucky.
Oh, the gear, it's light years ahead of what we had,
Just the outerwear alone.
Yes.
It's like, I remember having real scabby deer hunting stuff. And that was about it.
Blaze orange.
Yeah, we were, totally.
Out on the ice with blaze orange on.
100%.
I definitely can relate to that. I don't know if I ever wore the blaze orange on the ice, but definitely Carhartts. Wet, canvas type of knees. The jackets and the boots.
Terrible boots.
Terrible boots. I could think of, the bread bag in the boot type of boots. Yeah. And now the boots are awesome. The suits are awesome. Everything about ice fishing is awesome. The technology. My son gravitates towards technology. I mean, that's his gig. He just loves it. The fact that you have underwater cameras, the fact that you have killer sonar units, the fact that you have lithium battery powered augers, and you can go out there and rip holes, and even if he's only fishing for a couple hours and he's got to run to practice afterwards, he has time to do that. He could just throw that stuff in his truck, and now he can do it, after school or on a Saturday morning with his buds, and it's safe, it's affordable. I'd way rather have my son out ice fishing and doing that sort of thing than a lot of other things in life.
100%.
And I think you learn as a person. Like you said, you get a flat tire, you learn how to fix a tire.
Yeah.
You show up there for the first time and your Markham's dead.
Yep.
So then you realize as a person, I need to charge my own Markham. So
yeah, fishing's a good way to remind you of all those life examples, right? We always teach ourselves out there.
Yeah, right on. Well, Joel, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Yeah.
And being on the podcast. I want to tell all our listeners, again, the OnXFish app is free right now for people to download. I'm telling you what, if you're a fish head, if you're a map junkie, if you want a one-stop shopping place to just geek out over fish things.
Exactly.
Go to the app. Download the app. It's super simple. I know for me, I've spent countless hours already on the app just looking at different lakes that I want to fish, I want to experience. So thanks again for being on the show. I want everybody to tune in to Dialed In Angling. Search for Perch this week's episode. If you're a perch angler, if you like chasing jumbo perch, if you're excited about your perch fishing adventures in the near future, check out the episode. Hopefully we teach you quite a bit about underwater camera use and, of course, catching great big jumbo perch. Joel, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks. Time to get some fish.
Right on. Until next week, I'm Tony Roach. This has been Dialed In Angling Podcast.